Hey everybody, welcome to the next edition of Founders Talk. Today we have one of our good friends and local startup experts, and the name we recently coined him is Startup Ninja, Rajiv. How you doing, Rajiv?
I'm doing well, Kyle. Good to be here.
Yeah, man, it was good to have you here. Rajiv, like these founder talks for us represent an opportunity for us to be able to showcase Orlando as an international hub for social entrepreneurship. And as we bring in speakers to highlight what Orlando can offer in terms of expertise and resources to any social entrepreneur worldwide. Obviously, you're a perfect fit for that. As I introduced you as the startup ninja, that means that you have a lot of value when it comes to people at their very early stages. So I want to first start off by talking about what is it that like kind of your journey, like what brought you, because you obviously do a lot, well, it's not obvious to the audience, but to myself and Ben, you do a lot of work in the startup space, and you have your own startup, but what led you there? Like kind of track us through the beginnings all the way up until today.
Sure, happy to. I don't know where you want me to start, but I graduated as a mechanical engineer from India and came over here to do my master's. I did my MBA in Ohio, actually, Toledo, and then did a bunch of Fortune 500 consulting, moved around
Wait, are you
from.
a Rocket? A Toledo? Is it a
Yep,
Toledo
that's
Rocket?
right. That
Okay.
is correct. Yeah. Yep.
Because I was hoping you weren't going to say Ohio State, because we have to shut this call down.
You gotta shut it down.
Shut it down.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
That's right.
Rajiv.
That's right. We were proud. We are proud Rockets. So I did that, then graduated, worked in a bunch of 500, F500 companies, first in the healthcare space, then in the financial industry. Uh, we did e-banking and mobile banking applications. So I started as a mechanical engineer, but I moved into software and have been doing that ever since. During that process, it was just kind of normal growth process. You get into a job, you kind of ask the questions, learn what's going on, see how you can help solve those problems. And very quickly, I would say probably in the first 4 or 5 years, I realized that a lot of the software project issues, and at the time, Agile hadn't yet made its appearance. I'm dating myself. So there was a lot of projects, software projects that I think failure rate was around 75, 80%. So a lot of projects were extremely frustrating for developers. It
Wow.
took a long time, and then you'd find out that you didn't meet your needs. So just following, I'm a curious guy, as you know, always asking questions. So natural progression of asking those questions was realizing that a lot of the issues were not related to software quality, but were related to decision making at the high level, right? And so really going into that process more deeply, when I joined Fiserv and worked my way up from, senior developer to architect to manager, overseeing a team, those are the questions that I kept asking. And I was kind of trying to develop my own methodology of how I run projects. And I helped, I was overseeing some really large implementations at the time. US Bank mobile banking implementation was one that I was helping oversee. And that was the biggest mobile banking application at the time. We had teams in 3 continents across different 6 or 7 time zones. And the problems were again related to decision making and moving those things forward. And so I made some recommendations. We started creating a knowledge management function within our company. I led some of that effort. And we had absorbed multiple product development companies. So bringing everybody together was hard. And around that time, I realized that I think I had kind of capped how much I could learn in that process. And I really was starting to get hungry to do something on my own. I had taken dabble at multiple things before that. And at this point, had a couple of good colleagues there that we decided, hey, let's start something together. And so we really started in Formulate 14 years ago, had 2 partners, and it wasn't easy, right? As you know, with all of the
Yeah.
founders here, we all know starting something is really, really hard, and it's a leap of faith. So one of my partners dropped off within the first year. It just was too much to hack to manage a full-time job and to start a company because we didn't take a full plunge and we wanted to test the waters first. And the other founder, that co-founder that I had, dropped off in I think 3-4 years. We got a bit of traction. We had a few clients coming, and it was just hard to manage everything. So since then, for the last 10 years, I guess I've been running it myself, and my wife. We both work together in Formulate. So it's been quite a journey, kind of transitioning in that period over 10 years once I really started getting into it, and then quitting my full-time job 10 years ago or so, and then moving that forward with my wife, who's an environmental engineer, by the way, and she's the majority owner of the company. She's been great. We've had a great team. She quit her environmental engineering position, and now we built this thing together.
So Rajiv,
Uh,
really quickly, like you, it's interesting. So and Formulate, the reason why Formulate exists, can you repeat that one additional time for me, just so I can make sure I'm clear on that?
yeah,
Because obviously you saw an issue in how things were being developed in your day-to-day job, right, in corporate America.
exactly. Yeah, I mean, I was working at enterprise level software, and the
Mhm.
challenges there are quite different. They look different, but they have some of the same roots in terms of decision making that the startups have. Like if you're trying to solve a customer problem, right? In corporate America, the problem is that things are very bloated. They move very slowly. That used to
Right.
be the case 14 years ago. It's still the case today, except for, as we know, Silicon Valley moves pretty fast, but corporate America, especially the financial industry, moves pretty slowly. The problems of decision making were pretty deep in that for any decision that had to be made, you had to have all these approvals happen. And the rate of disruption was very low because the ability to absorb knowledge and apply those changes and move forward was limited, which means, as we've seen in the last 10, 15 years since I started in Formulate, the financial industry has been disrupted on numerous sides, right? You had
Okay.
PayPal, Bitcoin, and everything like that. So that's the problem I saw, was that how do we help leaders of, at the time specifically software, but now we're branching outside of just software. How do
So
we help
so you
leaders make those decisions?
so you saw that it was that the reason why the failure rate was as high as it was is because um, the decision making took a long time to arrive or to do, and as a byproduct, like the result was that the software couldn't be disruptive, and then obviously is it the decision making, did it help hold up the software's ability to um, like, what I guess what I'm trying to get to is like, what is it about the decision making that inherently made the products fail, besides it not being disruptive, like some of the specifics or the process that they went through in terms of decision making?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's a great question. So I would put it into two buckets, um, maybe three, which is a sub bucket of one. So the main problem is just the communication, right? Functional leaders communicate differently from technical leaders. They think they know what they want, and then converting that into technical requirements was one challenge. Just a maturity level, right? Being able to speak each other's language. That was one language problem. The other problem is just, what do you want to build, right? And if you see in the back, there's a start with why thing, right? And most people don't start with why. That's why the book was written, and that's why it's got so much of a following, was people don't start with why. And really understanding the objectives of the solution, knowing that there are multiple ways to get to the solution, knowing that there's ways to experiment without putting a lot of money into it, which is the lean startup method. And I'm sure we'll cover lean startup shortly. Those were the things that didn't exist at that time. And so as I asked those questions and I started in Formulate, I actually had on my website at the time a feedback loop called Ask, Listen, Learn, which, as you know, is very similar to the build, measure, learn loop that the lean startup had. So I was kind of heading in that same direction already. And when I read the book, Lean Startup, it was just everything fell into place. Like, yeah, this guy has asked all the questions I wanted to ask. Not only that, he has answers for a lot of things that I'm trying to solve. So it was a very much a, love at first sight moment for me. And then that kind of pivoted the direction of Informulate as well. Now, hopefully
Yeah,
I,
that.
I love that. I love that because the genesis for in Formulate wasn't like, oh, I've got a genius product that I just need to get to market. And what I really love about working with you, Rajiv, in startups is this deep understanding that entrepreneurship is about a process, not a lightning bolt of an idea, and that the best entrepreneurs are in like enlivened or energized by addressing a problem with an iterative solution, not announcing some new product to market. And that story in Formulate does that over and over again. But I love that what you were energized by was like, oh, we can create a system that solves problems over and over again. And that's why we call you the startup ninja, because you get this process and can apply this process to so many different problems or markets or verticals.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what energizes me is solving problems day in and day out. Like there's a different set of problems, and I love being in the consulting space because I get to see so many different problems across different domains, startup level, enterprise level, management level, and of course with having employees and all that, there's that set of challenges, HR challenges. So it's just really once you get to that process side of things, you can actually apply lean startup principles to any problem, and the concept of experimentation to any problem. So it doesn't have to be technical and doesn't have to be business model.
yeah. That's I would agree with you, and entirely on there. And when you started and Formulate, I'm is it so you saw that enterprises were not being disruptive, having product failures, which comes with a ton of waste and resources and things like that. So your value proposition was, hey, I can help you become more successful in launching these new products or enterprise level new initiatives, and and then the method that you use to help them be successful, was that the lean startup process that you had read, and I obviously fell in love with it.
I'd say we started before we really had the process. We just knew that there was a problem and there was a
Okay.
way that we could do it better, that we felt like we could serve customers better, but we didn't really have a process 14 years ago. And then
Oh,
by the time my other two partners dropped off and my wife got involved and we started rebuilding, at that point, we were just extremely curious people who were trying to solve problems. And we were trying to develop our own methodology. And at the time, Agile had come out. So we were Agile, definitely very much in the Agile camp. And we had to pivot a couple of times because we started first off where we were like, hey, the big problem is in understanding customer problems. So we're going to be the people who directly talk to the client and extract those and make sure we're solving the right problem for the client.
right,
And we'll just ship all the work outside. So we had a offshore team that worked there. And then as we looked at Agile, and Agile really tries to get face-to-face interactions and having that high trust relationship, and we brought all the jobs back, and we now have a 100% onshore team because we really wanted to have that high response time and ability to respond to the client's needs, as well as having that knowledge where it's not just me understanding the client needs, it's all of our team, right? Everybody is being trained in Formulate to ask those questions, to hold themselves accountable, to keep, make, really look at the client as a place where you have to make commitments as you would with any professional organization, but you're also looking at not just, hey, I did my part, my code works. It's I shipped it to you, now it's your problem, right? We don't have that attitude. We have like, okay,
um,
you're taking this code and you're going to build it in this environment, and you're going to target this customer who's also going to do this other stuff. How does all of that fit in to where the outcome of your product, of your software product, actually meets and provides the result, the business outcomes and the customer value that you're building it for? So that is the, multiple step level growth and maturity that we have to build for each of our employees. Because when you're building a piece of code, you get a requirement, I want a form that does this, you are expected to ask multiple whys
I
to.
think that's really cool because you know that your customers didn't come to you because they wanted a cool software program. They came to you because they wanted a business outcome. And so
Yes,
it doesn't matter how cool your software program is, if it doesn't deliver the business outcome, you're going to lose that customer. And I
that
think that that's like another example of being enamored with the problem and the process and not the solution, so that we're not on the call. I think that's really applicable, that we keep our eye on the ball of what we're actually trying to deliver. Um,
Yeah.
Rajiv, I
100%.
know, oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to add that's exactly what drove me, right? It's very unusual for, I think, most of the folks that are doing software development come from an extremely technical background, as I did as well. But the curiosity aspect of what I was looking at was really solving the business problem, not the technology. And I wasn't, I would say, an average coder. I wasn't like a rock star coder. Maybe that was a good thing because I work with rock coders now. But the idea is that we bring the best of both worlds to actually solve the business problem. Go ahead.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
no, oh, go ahead, Kyle.
well, no, I was just, because I'm always trying to link people and understand like why they do what they do, and the fact that you aren't are an engineer. There's the engineering is understanding what the problems are and how do you build a solution. So it's very interesting. Like when people say like, for me, like I have my background is in biology, right? So my degree is in biology, and all my work is graduate level work was in science. And so it's like they ask the questions like, do you still use the the tools that the degree that you use in your regular life? I'm like, no, I don't use biology. But when I really think about it, it's like with you, it's like, although you still don't use engineering technically, the thought process on how you for you, how you solve a problem, how you build things to solve that problem. For me, it was understanding systems and being enamored by systems and understanding how they work and how they should coordinate with each other to create an optimum system. So it's very, I can see how we both ultimately can do well in startup, because you're essentially doing that. You're looking at problems, you're looking at systems, and you're saying, how can we bring all of this stuff together to create a solution for a customer, a great outcome for a customer.
Yeah, no, that's a great point as well, which you just mentioned, which is every experience you go through, whether it's directly relevant or not, is relevant. You'll find some learning from it that you can take forward, and that's always been my attitude.
Yeah.
Part of why I engage with startups and mentors is, there's no immediate revenue to be generated by the mentoring that I do, but the experience of broadening how you think and the different business challenges in the different domains and looking at the patterns that connect those challenges is the learning that I have from even mentoring, right? So
Yeah.
you have to have that feedback loop of like, hey, you're actually gaining something from this experience to continuously be engaged with that experience.
Yeah. So I want to go backwards and then move forwards, because I think to go backwards to move forward is necessary. You talked about agile, and then obviously there's a difference between agile and the process you use now, which is the lean startup process, or maybe not. But for the sake of our fellows in the audience, um, can you really briefly describe the tenets of agile, and then talk about why the leap from there over to the lean startup? Can you do that for us?
Sure. I would say the lean startup is a nice kind of point in time where this thing called innovation methodology really was a thing that the phrase innovation methodology was something that people started talking about, right? I mean, I'm sure a lot of people are doing innovation and they have been doing it for decades. It's just that the methodology piece started coming together there. So prior to Agile, there was the waterfall method, which was software development lifecycle, very structured, very rigid. Do all your requirements up front, then do all your design, then do all your development, then do all your testing, and then do the deployment. more or less. There's a few more steps there, but it was very rigid, and it was kind of a handoff. Like you do this job and then you hand it off to somebody else. And it took weeks sometimes just to finish requirements, sometimes months. And by the time you finished it, things had changed, and now it was too late to make your changes. So it was very expensive to go through that loop again, which is why turning the ship was very slow. And so Agile came, and it was just by developers. It was a movement by developers to say, this is not going to, it's not working for our clients. We can see 70%, 80% software failure rates on projects because things move too slowly and clients are extremely frustrated. So what do? We'll just have to ask them what they want and give them what they want really quickly. And at the same time, there was a technological revolution, which was, turning, the methods and development and prototyping and everything like that. Things were much faster to build. So you didn't need to spend 5 weeks writing requirements on a document which nobody cares about, versus actually building the thing that they asked for in a few days or a day, right?
Right.
So that was a big change. And so Agile really came from that, and also from the dynamic of how the team works, and really looking at software development not as a thing that the nerds do, but really getting them the skills to be in client meetings, getting them the skills to be in project management, and to set expectations, and really solving some of those problems. Give me a second, turn off my phone here. Should So that was a change for Agile. And then there are, I would recommend everybody to go to Google the Agile Manifesto, which is a great document. It really was groundbreaking at the time in terms of the principles. They have, I think, 7 principles and 4 concepts: people over processes, teams over technology, things like that, that were their, the manifesto that they put together on how this is going to change software development. And it did, right? And it was a lot of resistance. It took a long time to actually get broad acceptance, which it does now, and it's used all over large enterprises as well, which, at the time when I was doing work, it was far from settled. Like, people were like, yeah, that's not going to work in the big
Yeah.
guys. Okay for startups, but it's not good for us.
Right.
Now it's everybody. Now it's everybody. So that was the transformation from Agile, was really the execution side of things. How do we execute faster? How do we get more responsive? How do we reduce time to market? That is the objective of Agile. Now, Lean Startup is actually very much inspired by Agile. So one of the core concepts of Agile, if you look at the 7 principles, one of the principles is um, simplicity, right? How do you do things in the shortest possible way without waste? And one of the biggest wastes in a project is when you very carefully map out this feature that nobody uses, right? And that is the biggest waste, because you can make a mistake in code, you can fix the bug. That's not very time consuming. But you map out this whole feature and nobody uses it. That is a massive waste. It's taken so many man hours from so many different people to work in a team to develop this feature, and it's useless.
Yeah.
So Lean Startup tried to tackle that problem of not just fast execution, but the why. Like, who's the client? What problem do they have? What solution is the appropriate solution? So they fit together really well. I don't think one
Yeah.
eclipses the other. It's just they fit together really well. And Agile is mentioned multiple times throughout the Lean Startup book.
Rajiv, I think one of the shifts that happens there from that cascade to the agile and the lean is that willingness to come out to your customer with something that's in process.
I love that.
And I think that that's a culture change where we had the people were willing to look behind the curtain and see a product in development and go with a provider, right? And when we are working with entrepreneurs, one of the constant kind of sources of consternation or confusion or anxiety is how viable does my minimum viable product have to be before I can take it to someone and test it out? Do you have any like dummy proof strategy, or how do you know when it's safe to bring it out and you're not going to embarrass yourself or shoot yourself in the foot on a future sale to bring a product out. Is there an easy way to solve that problem, or is it just like
No, Ben.
good?
But that's why Rajiv is the start of Ninja. So what do you
That's
think, Rajiv?
right.
No, absolutely. So I just thought, I just made a connection. You were talking so eloquently about it. I just made a connection for the first time. It's like, if you feel like you will lose the client with your MVP, you probably aren't working with the right client.
Wow.
That's interesting. Wait,
Wow.
why would you? Okay, you just swung your sword here, and I don't understand why you swung. I mean, I guess I understand why you swung it. But I just want to understand the impact of the swing here. Explain, dive into that a little more for us. Unpack that for us.
Yeah, I was deriving that from what Ben just said, and it actually makes sense if you think about it. Is most people are scared of putting an MVP out there that is not as professional and successful and easy to use, or whatever thing that you feel is not yet there in the, because it's a minimum, and your client is going to walk away from you. I want you to think about the adoption curve, right? Of any technology, any product, any service. There's the early adopters, there's the early majority, late majority, and laggards. So if you are working with the late majority or laggards or the early majority, they're looking for a finished product. And so if you're talking to those people, you're not working with the early adopters. And if you are talking to early adopters, what are the characteristics of early adopters? Early adopters are the ones that are actually going to give you the feedback that you want. They really, really, really feel the pain of the problem that you're trying to solve, to the extent that they are hacking together solutions today to solve this problem. So if their, half-assed attempt to solve that problem is something that they're putting a lot of money into, your 75% ask problem is a solution is probably better than what they have today, right?
Yeah.
But for those people who want everything together before they purchase something, that's not your initial market. That's your early majority market, not your early adopter.
I like that a lot. It makes me think of Marlena, Kyle, from our last cohort, when she really had that rub about when was she ready to go to customers. And when she ran into that one first customer who had basically sold the product, but didn't all of their customers, but didn't know how they were going to develop it, then her halfway done version was better than what they could come up with. And they were really willing to help her create it. And it sped her up really quickly. That's really compelling. If you're going to lose your customer with an MVP, it's probably not the right time for that customer.
Right.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's yeah, that is a tension that we we oftentimes see with our fellows in terms of when do they go to market. And a lot of times, most of the time when we look at some of the reasons that they struggle is because they still are in the phase of trying to understand what are the problem sets of the customer. And so as a result of it, they come in with a notion with a notion of what the problem is, and then they go and they're building features outside and then not sharing those features with the customer, and just cascades into a bad thing. So I want you to like when you're first starting off, are there any wisdom that you can give in terms of how organizations or startups should approach understanding customer problems, and then how does that feed into unique value proposition and product development?
Yeah, there's I guess different ways you could answer that question, but I guess the biggest problem that I've seen is usually the founder mindset on really buying into this concept, right? Before we talk about what the mindset is, we need to be ready to accept a new mindset. And it's, we really, I mean, somebody, I think it was Mark Andreessen or somebody who said that the startup founder has to be schizophrenic, right? They have to believe two things that are contradictory at the same time and be fine with it, right? There has to be cognitive dissonance, because on one side you have real confidence that what you're building you can pull it off, and you know you're going to make it happen. And on the other hand, you have to be really insecure about all the ways that you have to solve problems and all the things you don't know and what you need to go do. So there's a dissonance there that
Oh
has to.
man, you just made me feel way better about confidence and anxiety next to each other all the time. Thank you, Rajiv.
You're welcome. It's a real problem, and it's really hard to do. And so generally what happens is people who are doing it, first time founders especially, right? They don't know that that dissonance is normal. They think, no, I'm supposed to be the guy or gal who is projecting this image of confidence, and I make the decisions, and I have all the answers. And that is going to get crushed over and over again during that process. And what happens is they will default. And this is where the mindset shift has to happen. They will default to what they know best. Whatever their past experiences, they will default to that. When they get hit with this truck again and again, they're going to default. And so what happens is, like, a lot of founders have great ideas, they have a real problem, they have a solution, but it might not be exactly the real problem. There might be some tweaks to that. But because they have defaulted to their solution, they're going to push that solution no matter what. And they are, the biggest problem that we have with startup founders is typically that they are not looking outside their area of expertise. So if I'm a technical guy, I'm going to look for technical solutions to everything. You know, you have a hammer, everything's a nail. And if you're a marketing person, you're looking at marketing solutions to everything. And so what the lean startup and the business model canvas and all of that gives us is, no, you have to look at the whole picture. It doesn't matter that you're a technical expert. You have to look at marketing, you have to look at partnerships, you have to look at value proposition. And so when you're forced to look at the whole picture and you go through a process like what we do at Rally, which is, you know, has come along so well. And now we're like, I love how we're just nailing those biggest risks and going after them aggressively and with a laser focus. That's, I don't see a lot of, you know, accelerators doing that. But that's exactly what founders need, is they need to shine the light not on their expertise, but on their lack of expertise. And they need to be able to be making peace with that insecurity of not having answers in a lot of places where they thought, hey, I have a product, it's ready to go to market, why am I going back 2 steps? Because, you know, those are the steps we have to take. So hopefully that answers your question on that. But once you do that, once you make the mindset shift that, hey, I'm, you know, for lack of a better word, deficient in certain areas, well, great, now you know that, you're much better prepared to find the partners and to find the team members, find the mentors that can help you fill that gap.
Yeah, man, that's so what you said is I just want to just double tap on that, because you know, that mindset shift is hard, right? You spend all your time and your energy, resources building something, and the last thing you want to be told, like, you want that thing to succeed because you're enamored with the product or the widget that you've created, right? And when it doesn't, when you put it out there, finally, if you ever get it out there and it's met with resistance, then you're forcing, you're still trying to drum and get it to work, right? You're like, okay, like, no, you're not seeing it right, you're not seeing it right, and you're trying to convince the customer of a problem that you believe that they have, or that your problems, your product, your widget solves. And so it's hard to emotionally back out of that and to admit, wait, hold on, I might need to step backwards in order to move forward. And the stepping backwards is, I need to do better understand what the customer problem is, and then then from there, once I have a clear picture on that, I may have to tweak the product that I've developed, or I may have to just entirely abandon it, right? Or pivot. And so that's that. I don't want to step over how difficult a decision that is, because I've experienced that. I've talked many times that I've spent thousands of dollars developing a product, which I thought was the right thing, and come to find out that it was completely off. It was in the arena, but it was still off. It didn't resonate the way it was supposed to resonate. And once I started listening to the customers and understanding, the product evolved dramatically over time. And I was thought to myself, man, I could have saved myself a whole lot of time and money if I didn't do that. So, so yeah, I appreciate you sharing that with us. As you, so we talk about, you know, there's some wisdom that you have in your head. And so I want you to shine a light, and you talked a little bit about this already, but with early stage founders, such as the ones we have on this call, and people who will listen to this, what can you give us 3 or 4 examples of, or nuggets of wisdom, and then say what they are, and then walk through individually why they are important. Why is it important that startups or founders do this, or pay attention to this, or incorporate this?
Yeah, I think one of the things is definitely the piece about the cognitive dissonance and being ready to basically take an axe to your self-esteem, right? Because your self-esteem is projecting this, and you have to, it reduces your passion, reduces your energy. Let's be honest about it, right? When you're dealt these questions, you are challenged in such a way that you're not sure anymore. But your confidence needs to be based not on your product, but on your ability to figure out solutions. And because being a startup founder is, you're going to have problems every day, multiple times a day, different, completely unrelated problems, different customers, HR problems, financial problems, investor challenges, quality issues, operations issues, partner issues. So it's a never ending problem solving story. So that's what you're signing up for, and just be honest about it. And that's okay, right? You're not going to win them all, but you have to lose a certain battle, but you might win, you have to aim to win the wars. That's a first point. And the second point is definitely about knowing that what you don't know can hurt you, right? And the idea is that your strength is generally something that you do much better than others, right? That's what it means to have a strength. You're doing that better than others. So the thing that you need to focus on is to round out your founding team or your circle to fill in the gaps there, because there is, the Dunning-Kruger effect, right? You guys might have heard of it. It's a cognitive bias. You know, I don't want to go political here and take things off track, but a lot of people say they know what this thing is and they know how to tackle it, are the people who know the least about it, right? They're the most confident. The people who have the most confidence probably have the least data, right? The people who have a lot of experience and have done the legwork and have dug deep into it know that there are multiple possibilities here. It could be this, it could be that, it could be this. Sure, I'll give you a 5% chance, and that's worth talking about. 5%, yeah, that's possible. But the people who feel 100% that this is what it is are the people who have the least knowledge. And so that's what happens to founders, because when they are dealing with a space that they don't know, they're like, oh yeah, I'll build all this thing up, and then I'll just press this marketing button and it's going to work, right?
Well,
Everybody's gonna
I love that phrase, what you don't know can hurt you, because that one, I feel like, especially when you're starting something, there's so much work to do that it's very easy to go, I'm just going to pay attention to the things that don't scare me, the things that I feel like I can figure out. And the stuff that's kind of looming behind, I'm going to pretend that it'll just be fine. And
yeah.
it took me a while to realize that what you're not seeing, you can't fix. And it doesn't change it just because you're not looking at it. And it seems like a really normal thing, but I see it happen with entrepreneurs, where the stuff we don't understand, the stuff that will be harder for us to figure out, we just don't look at it and hope it'll go fine.
Yep.
And it certainly won't get any better if we don't look at it. And it may get a little bit better if we do look at it. I love that phrase, what you don't know can hurt you.
Yeah.
I think that's
Another,
important.
another way to say that is, what got you here won't get you there, right? The skill set that you brought and the experiences that you brought to this point Now that you're playing at this level, let's call it level 4, right? Won't get you to level 10 because you have to learn new skills to get to level 10.
Yeah, and Rajiv, I want to be. I know you have other points, but I just want to talk about this really quickly. Is that it explains why the business model, the lean business model canvas is such an important tool, because you can visually lay out in a systematic way the business, and it forces you to look at these areas that typically if you're just great at marketing, you just want to do marketing, right? You just think if you just push the button, everything will go. But it forces you to think through these questions and come up with answers, and then simultaneously you understand where the gaps are, right? In it. And so I agree with you. What you don't know um, can harm you, and if you don't understand, for example, the product you're going to delivering and the costs that's associated with delivering of that product, then how many businesses have you and I run across that have a price point, or in the restaurant industry is one of these industries where they're jam packed. And then they go out of business, and then you're like, well, why did they go out of business? They had so many customers. It's because they didn't have an understanding of their costs and how to control their costs, and so their costs exceeded the revenue that was coming in, and that killed them, right? And we know that startup is the same way. People don't understand um, how to build, to be able to deliver something and the cost associated with delivering that, and the impact that it has on the revenue, right? And the relationship it has with the revenue, and how your pricing of that product has to be appropriate to compensate for the cost of delivering that product.
Yep.
And so, yeah, that lean business model canvas, I think, is one of the beauties that it forces you to understand those areas, and then also to grapple with what you don't know and to fill those gaps. And so, when you talk about, and I know you have some other points, but I just want to kind of hover here for a second. Is when you talk about feeling like you don't, are you saying that you have to, like, is it like you don't have to know everything, but you're also saying that's okay as long as you acknowledge that you don't, and then you get people to come in and fill those gaps? Like, what are some of the ways that you've seen startups? Because sometimes, like, finding a founder or going out and finding a founder is not is a hard thing to do, right? And so, how do people go about, especially in the startup phase when they have minimal resources, minimal whatever? How do they go about filling in those gaps of what they don't know?
Okay, that's another very common startup fallacy, is that I have to play my cards close to my chest, right? And that's another mindset shift that has to happen with startup founders, is like, I have this idea, it is really cool, it's going to work, and you're on that side of your self-esteem cycle, right? You're not looking at the other piece, and you're like, I'm going to make it work, and then I'm going to get investors and get all the resources and all that other stuff once I have that working, right? Or I'm going to pitch directly. But the reality is that everybody has busy lives, and this is one of the core things that Eric Ries talks about in Lean Startup, is that nobody cares about your idea unless you're generating revenue, right? If you're not generating revenue, you have an unproven idea, and those are a dime a dozen. Let's just accept the reality that there are really cool ideas, and that it's really, really hard for very, very smart people who've done this for decades to identify good ideas and separate them from bad ideas. And 90% of the time, it's about execution, right? It's not about the idea. So guarding your idea is really not worth the effort. In fact, it's the opposite. It's going to hold you back, and it's going to prevent you from executing if you hold on to your idea very closetly and not bring it out. So what are the ways you could do it? Orlando is great because I've been around. I know all the things that you could do here. Like Rally is a great idea, great place to bring your ideas, start a studio. There's, the pitch nights that happen. There's my meetup group, Lean Startup Orlando. There's Top Talent for Startups, which I also launched, where you can pitch your idea and you can find teams. There's Angel List out there that does something similar. There's Startup Weekend Orlando, which I organize. So there's a lot of different places where you can go. You can take your idea, and you can pitch it for equity partners. You can pitch it to team members. You can go to pitch nights and pitch it to investors. Just start setting the baseline for getting a lot of feedback. Oh, I forgot, 1 million cups is a great one too. So you pitch your idea in these places, and you know, bring a leather jacket, because it's gonna hurt. You know,
Yeah.
it's really gonna cut deep, and you know, it's something that's, the feedback loop begins there. And don't, the biggest mistake you can make is go there and pitch expecting somebody to join you, and then if that doesn't happen, you're like, oh, that was a waste of time. No, the feedback is the most important piece of that process, right? What are the
Yeah.
questions they're asking you, and how do you take it forward, and how do you move, fill those gaps that are being opened up, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah, I want to like that's really important. That feedback and getting because I remember in my first really startup experience, I spent a lot of time in isolation just with my team and us just building stuff, right? And it wasn't until and and it and it wasn't until I got out of that environment and started going to these different events and talking to people and really sharing my product with everybody I could that I learned the value of that feedback loop. And now I see myself really applying it, just being one, understanding like what's the why and what am I trying to solve here, but constantly listening to how people talk about the work I'm doing or the thing I'm doing, and picking out the cues and the similarities that so I can better talk or position the product or service that I'm trying to, build or maintain or grow, right?
yeah,
And so with all of our entrepreneurs, as you folks develop this stuff, you should be talking about these products in as many venues outside of your family and friends who can also lead you to failure at times. Although they love you, that's strange that they can also lead you to failure. But you should be getting out as much as you can, and talking about this stuff to people.
yeah.
And
To double down on that a little bit more is, when you talk to people, right? And it's very easy. The smarter you are, the better you are at rationalizing, right? So you can come up with all the reasons and explanations why this pitch didn't go well. And you can say, hey, these people are not in the same space. They don't understand the domain. They don't have this. They don't have that. The more you start discounting other people's feedback, the more you're reinforcing your own loop, and you're going into your echo chamber in your bubble, and you're not bringing yourself out to bring the feedback loop. And that's really the key thing around all this, is the feedback loop. Like, do you have enough feedback loops to sense the outside world? Think of it as superpowers, right? That's how I explain it to people who've never heard of lean startup. Is, you're this guy, and let's say, or gal, you have five senses. You can see, you can smell, blah blah blah, right? Now, how do you know what the market is thinking? You don't. You need to develop a sensory power that allows you to figure out what the market is thinking. Not what, and then how do you come up with the experimentation to create that feedback loop? And then you need to create that feedback loop with your investors. You need to create that feedback loop with your end users. You need to create that feedback loop with your team. That's when you become a Superman, right? Or woman, and you have these superpowers where you sense these things before they happen,
yeah,
right? Uh, that's the power of this. And don't say that someone doesn't have domain experience so they don't understand your problem. You will be dealing with people who don't have domain experience. That pitch that you gave that went down badly to people who don't have domain experience, you need to tweak that pitch to better communicate what you're doing within your domain to people who don't have that experience.
yeah, no, it's really, um, man, thank you for saying that. Now here's what's interesting. How do you, for our fellows, most of them are in a process right now where they're just trying to really clarify what the customer issues are and the problems that they need to be solving, and they're um, are now receiving or should be receiving very soon information on, that better clarifies who that customer is. What if in Rajiv's world as the startup ninja, uh, hacking his sword efficiently through the world of business entrepreneurship, what would you do with, what would be the, once you receive that treasure trove of customer data on their problems, needs, and how they need to be talked to, what would you do with that data?
Yeah. So the first thing with that is, when you think you've achieved something, right? You have to switch on the insecurity part of it, the paranoia part of it, and say, and question it, right? Is this really treasure or is this garbage? You know,
Mhm.
and start validating that. So the biggest thing is not to discount anybody's ability, right? All of what I said today is to make sure that you're looking at reality the right way. Your strengths are your strengths. Know what your strengths are. Your weaknesses are your weaknesses. Know what your weaknesses are. So if you made some progress, you got some great feedback from a customer, and you think there's a next step forward, remember that you're still working with assumptions until you have a long-term relationship with that user set. You're still working with assumptions. The way to validate it is to take the smallest chunk of validation possible with the smallest increment of value possible. So first thing is, can you get a check from them? And I see someone ask this question, so I'll kind of answer this question here too, is can MVP users pay for your product? Absolutely. We do this all the time at Startup Weekend. That's one of the things I love. That's the reason that Orlando, and you guys were part of it in, was it 2018 or 2019? Yeah. You were hosting Startup Week in Orlando with us.
Yeah.
And last 2 years, we had global startup champions come out from Orlando as a result of the lean startup method that we were employing here, and really being able to generate revenue and traction within a single weekend. So if they can do that in 48 hours, you can certainly do that over a couple of months. You can generate revenue with your MVPs. You can get people to pay for products that don't exist. Uh, Absolutely, you can. You should be attempting to do those kinds of things to aggressively move the ball forward. So to answer your question, yeah, the next step would be what is that MVP? And then after that MVP is done, what is the next feature set or whatever that you're going to open up and validate? And so I do this all the time with experiments, right? We put a feature out there, and for an existing client which has multiple features, maybe just add a link or a button that says, "Oh, gamification thingamajig," right? And then if people aren't even going to click that button to find out what it is, don't build the app, right? Don't build the whole functionality around gamification if people don't even care about clicking on the link, because that's how they're going to get to the app. And you just validated that nobody's clicking on it. So you can try a few experiments, maybe put something else, hey, capture your points here. You can try different messages. And once they start clicking on the link, then you know what they're looking for. And then just send them to a page that says, hey, feature coming soon or whatever. So that's a very minimal app, very minimal experiment that literally has just a link, and it's like 5 minutes of effort to change the text on it. And that's an experiment that you can run to get validation before you go out and build a heavy feature.
So is
That's
it?
just one.
Yeah. So is it? And I agree with this, and I think that a lot of times people have a hesitation on, like they feel like they have to build something before people will actually cut them a check. So the goal, always the goal is to get a check from them, correct? Is
That
it,
is
to
the
see if
goal.
you, that's the
Absolutely.
goal, see if you can get a
Yep.
check. And
I
then,
will, I will jump in on one thing though. There are different stages of validation. The first stage of validation is getting people to give you their email address, and
okay,
to actually sharing information and data. That's one step. Taking a meeting is the next step up, where they're willing to spend time, like 1 hour or whatever, with the customer discovery. That's also validation. If they're not even willing to do that, obviously you have a problem. And then of course, getting letters of intent is the next piece up, because they're not actually paying you money, but they're committing to paying you money when the product is ready. And finally, of course, cash. Cold hard cash always is the best validation.
yeah, yeah. And what's interesting is you can do all of that without even a product being built. Like,
Absolutely. We do it all the time. It's very, very possible.
yeah,
And
like I
even,
remember. Go ahead.
I was going to say, even with business to business, right? People think you can do that with consumers. You can definitely do that with business to business. We've seen that
Yeah,
happen. Go
yeah.
ahead.
No, that's absolutely true. And you don't. And the key is, and this is what I learned the hard way, is that you can do that without actually building something, right? Like that's it's extremely expensive, right? I mean, the time required to build a little button that says push here, or to pick up a phone, or send out an email to get a meeting, is minimum compared to putting all your time and money in building a product or service that you don't even really know if people will do. And I've done that. And I remember I did that when I was at the time doing Learn Jelly, and I was pivoting out of some space, and I was wondering like whether or not if this was a good thing to work on. And I was like, okay, but in order for me to feel comfortable, I felt like I needed to be able to sell 100 future subscriptions of this product or service. So I tried to like phrase it in the best way that I could as a description. And so I just got an email list together, and then I started. I created the language in the email, and I sent it out. People weren't opening it up. I tweaked the language. People were opening it up. They were going to my page, my landing page, and then people weren't clicking the sign up button. And I was just like, okay, well, why is that happening? And I realized my landing page was clumsy. And then I changed that and resent it out. And then I got people to click through. And then the final piece was, can I just get somebody to pay me? I think it was like $100 for a future subscription. I mean, it might have been less than that. Like, I think it probably was less than that, but I think it was like, I wanted to get 100 people to pay for this product that I hadn't even delivered, that I'm just describing. And I got people to actually sign up and pay for it. And that's when I was like, okay, you can sell something without even building it.
Sure.
Right.
I mean, that's
Kickstarter
called the Music Man. You got to be careful. Make sure you can actually build it.
but I told them that there was no guarantee that, that this thing would be, you know,
I'm just
built.
saying.
So, but I just thought that was a cool thing. You're right. But that does feel somewhat the Music Man. That's funny.
Yeah. You know, Kickstarter's business model is built on that, right? Enabling that. So it happens every day, hundreds of times a day, thousands of times a day. So don't think that you're some special thing that can't follow the model. It absolutely can follow the model. Hardware products, software products, services, offerings, everything can go through that.
So our fellows should be taking this treasure trove of information that they get back and wondering whether or not it's a treasure trove. In order to get there, they need to be packaging it up in a way that validates that information. So are you encouraging them to immediately, as soon as they can, to start packaging up and trying to get one of the 3 or 4 things that you talked about, whether it's an email address or whether it's a meeting or whether it's
letter of intent
or a check? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's I call it levels of hardening because of software terminology, but you start with the softest approach, and then you harden your approach, and each level of hardening involves more investment on your part and your team's part in cash and all that. So the less certainty you have about something, the softer your approach is and your open-ended questions and that kind of thing. As you get towards the other end of the spectrum, you have a very clear feature set and you have a very clear revenue model, and you're actually building things at that point, right? And then from there, you're trying to iterate on what you built to add new features and things like that. So make sure at each level that you know which stage of the journey you're building on it. And again, it's not just about the overall business, it's about each feature, right? Every single feature goes through this process of hardening. So it's not like, hey, I got this feature now I can just build everything. No, every feature should go through that process. Always go back and let your paranoia work with you. You make it work for you, right? Use your paranoia and question those things, and then come up with a mitigation and go back and attempt that in the smallest increment of value possible, and then keep repeating that process.
Man, Rajiv, I love that. Use your paranoia. At this time, I want to open it up to the fellows. What is your paranoia saying to you right now in terms of what questions you should be asking Rajiv, the Startup Ninja, during the session? Who wants to go first?
Yeah, so I'll jump in. Awesome discussion, Rajiv. I took a lot of notes here, and one of the things I'm thinking about is in the problems we face doing a B2G type sale, because we are innovators and we're bringing solutions to unarticulated needs for the government, which means, you know, requirements aren't drafted, and you've got you know, kind of a complicated decision-making process like you would selling to any large organization, you know, be it a bank or something else. And what's a vignette or a recommendation you have experimenting in that environment?
That's a great question. That is one of the more complex sales, is B2G or even B to large, very large enterprise, because of the multi multiple people involved in the decision-making unit, the buying decision, right? So you have people in the front lines that you have to convince, then you have to work your way up, potentially up the chain. You got to get buy-in from that. So my recommendation would be skip the going up the chain piece, right? Go straight to the top, as high to the top as you can get, as fast as you can get, because you will have different value propositions and different evaluation criteria as you talk to different layers. And so the people who feel the problem most and the people who have the decision making power, which will then get the rest of the wheels in motion, is where you want to start. And so you got to focus your attention on how do I find out, like, let's say that decision making unit for your particular service is like 2/3 of the way up, like we're talking VP level people, right? So then let's focus just on that. What is the pitch to them? What is the problem they're trying to solve? How does this help them look good? Remember, in a corporate hierarchy or any kind of governance hierarchy, it's all about how does this make me look good, right? So you have to ask that question, not just about, there might be a very clear business value, there might be all of that stuff, but is it actually helping me look good as well, is a key part of that pitch. And I use that all the time, is because when we engage with you, you're not only just going to get a software piece, but when your bosses ask you, like, what are the metrics and behind this solution and what outcomes did you achieve, we are prepared with that. Here's the ROI. You get your ROI in 9 months, and after that, it's gravy, right? So those kinds of things of how do we get them to be really motivated to go out and sell this inside their company is the key piece. So you have to answer both of those. You have to answer the question of the actual value proposition, but also how does this translate into better visibility and better success for that individual and the role that they're talking about.
I think that is really relevant for a lot of social enterprises. What we find a lot is that the customer is not always the same as the user or the benefactor of the program. And so you end up having to make multiple case statements and multiple value propositions for people in the supply chain of your, or the distribution chain of your product. So your advocate is different from your customer, is different from your user, and they all need to see why the product is valuable for them. It's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Any other questions? Gotta be some questions for the Startup Ninja.
Maybe I already covered them all. Preempted the question.
Diane?
Yes, actually I wrote in the chat, Raju, thank you for this amazing tips. I'm wondering about, did you have any experience while startups during the MVP, the users started to pay? Because I know several cases, but I don't know, is it good or not when you are doing MVP, but your clients or users are already paying for it? What does it mean? Does it mean that your product is kind of from MVP stage needs to go to the upper one, or?
Could you rephrase the question for me? Are you saying that you are charging the users for the MVP?
No, we're not. We're just in the phase to make it payable, but we're still in the phase of MVP. It's not the whole version, so we're kind of considering should we do it or not. But we know several cases that many people did. Some of them succeed, some of them not. So I'm wondering about your experience and your advice. Should it work?
That's a good question.
Are you saying, just so I can, I just want to repeat it. So right now you have customers using MVP, they're not paying for it. And yes, you want to get people to pay for your MVP. Is that the desire that you have?
No, it's not the desire. I'm just asking, I know cases that people did it and startups did, and we got that advice to make it payable. So I'm wondering, does Rajiv had any experience or any advice?
Yeah, so of course we need to go deeper into your business model to see what your potential revenue model could look like, right? There's Facebook doesn't charge anything to its users, but they have a revenue model that gets them money anyway. and it's making a lot of money. So you have the value proposition that you have with your users have to justify that price, right? And you can run an experiment. I don't know how many users you have, but letting them know that we are transitioning to this, sending an email out, and seeing what happens. If they decide to not use your service, that means that the revenue model there doesn't exist for that segment of population. Now you might find a segment of population that is willing to pay for that, and maybe that's the focus that you have, or you pivot to a model like where the use of your app is subsidized by third parties that have a vested interest in solving that business problem, like governmental agencies or NGOs that are trying to solve the problem from a social perspective, that have budget, and you're solving it in a better way. They might subsidize that app for you. So there's different ways to look at it, but you do have to come up and create those experiments in order for you to figure out which is the right one. Is this the right customer segment? Is there a segment that I can charge and a segment that I don't charge? Are there other sources of revenue apart from just charging?
I think for you, especially Guyana, that experimentation there will be really helpful so that you don't make some assumptions on who the best customer is, whether it's the therapist or the parent or some other third party in that network. So finding the right experiments there to figure out who can pay and in what way they pay will be important. Oh, cool. We have one more from Abdullah, and then I know Rajiv, you have a 10 o'clock. Thanks.
Yep.
Rajiv, hey, nice to see you again and talk to you, Rajiv. Actually, I have two questions. I'll make it quick. Tell me about the ratio. Every founder of a technology company I speak to is experienced in some kind of technology, but for a person like me, it's just vision. I put it on paper and I try to find people who can help me create my vision. What is the success rate there? And the follow-up question is, I think I hinted when we last spoke, I'm still working with a program developer that is a buddy of mine. We both started in business together, but I want to move forward and create a team. So where I am now, what is the next essential thing for me? Is it the CTO? Is it the market? What do I go now? So I know this is a heavy question. Help me.
Yeah, it definitely is a heavy question without having reminded myself about your specific context and what your business model looks like. In terms of ratio, I'm thinking you mean the equity split ratio?
I mean success ratio, right? I mean, person who doesn't have any experience in coding, what do I need?
Yeah, well, of course, you do definitely need, if you're in the technology space, you need technical help. The thing I would be careful of there is, most founders have a big ambition and they're willing to do what it takes to get to that ambition. So just be careful in terms of who you bring on and what leadership you give them and what equity you give them yet, because they may not be as ambitious. They may fit your need today, but will they continue to grow to be the leader that you want them to be remains to be seen. So be careful on that part. In terms of success, I don't think that the success depends so much on whether you have technical skills, but it really depends on how much can you empathize, because if you're going to be a leader who leads technical people, you need to speak their language. So you can't get away from that. You really do have to educate yourself on Agile. You have to understand how they take requirements. You have to have like I said, the feedback loop of managing somebody, right, has to be there. So you have to learn to develop those skills to oversee those projects and make sure they're actually telling you the truth in terms of what's happening on the ground and not going off and doing things which you don't want them to do. So don't worry about the success ratio. It's more about, are you spending your time and effort in the right thing and asking the right questions? And if you want advice, there's lots of places you can go for that. So that, Synapse has got a great platform here in Central Florida. Talent for Startups has a platform. AngelList has a platform. I'm sure there are people who would love to hear your idea and give you feedback and want to be a part of it.
Well, Rajiv,
a little feedback from you. Oh, sorry.
No, because Rajiv has to jump off here. And so, Rajiv, listen, as a startup ninja, We really appreciate you spending some time swinging your sword with us today. Once again, you're a great example of why Orlando should be one of the many stops that a social entrepreneur should make along their journey. So we appreciate your time today, Rajiv. Appreciate you
Thank
being
you.
here.
I'm honored to be here. And every time we go through a cohort of Rally, it's always wonderful to see how we bring together really amazing people. And this cohort is no exception. I'm sure they'll go on to do wonderful things. All the best to everybody. Thanks for having me.